Hi everybody, Dennis Prager in Dennis Prager's house, Dennis Prager's fireplace, Dennis Prager's bulldog. Okay, happy 4th to you Americans. This is seen all over the world, so if you're not American, you'll still find this of interest. This is a very important subject because America is, whether you like it or not, and I hope you like it, but I know many don't, the most important country in the world, I would say since World War I. And that's 100 years ago. So it's a significant subject, America. I want to talk to you about my own feelings about this country. And I actually didn't realize, it was a very interesting development in my life. I didn't realize how much I'll use the word, I love this country. It doesn't mean I love every American. I'm not a fool. Every country has good and bad people, okay? It's a fact. The worst countries have had good people, the best countries have had bad people. That we recognize that. But all things considered, I like the American people. I think that there are a lot of problems in that Americans used to appreciate what they had much more than they do today. So July 4th is the American Independence Day. Whether you're watching this in July on the day that of even July 4th actually, or in the middle of December sometime, it doesn't matter. All of these fireside chats are relevant, hopefully, for the foreseeable future. The ideas that I talk about are not time-bound. But anyway, a happy 4th to you if you're American, and if you're not, let me talk to you a little bit about my love of this country. I actually realized it when I didn't realize it growing up, to be honest. I took it for granted. It's a free country, and I also realized how rare it was. As a Jew in a Jewish family, I realized it's so rare in Jewish history, and I taught Jewish history on the college level at Brooklyn College. I realized how rare it was for Jews to feel so secure and non-self-conscious. I wrote a piece which you should take a look at. It's on the internet. I write a column every week. And I wrote a piece on joining the Simi Valley Rotary Club. Did I ever talk about that? That you recall? No, good. So the Rotary Club is an international organization, and I in my 20s, I moved from New York to California, and I've been in California ever since. And I joined the Simi Valley Rotary Club. Simi Valley is located about 30 miles northwest, I think that's about right, of Los Angeles. And at the time, it was deserted. There were 2 restaurants in the entire city. Today, it is a booming city, but it was empty. But I lived there for 3 years because I was brought to head an educational institute in Simi Valley, a gigantic Jewish retreat center. And so I lived there for 3 years, and I joined the Rotary Club. I was the only Jew in the club. And what I wrote in my article was, what dawned upon me was, this is the beauty. This is the beauty, and this is quintessential America. It didn't matter. That's the key. It meant essentially nothing to the other guys. I say guys because at that time Rotary was all male. They knew I was a Jew. I was the head of the Jewish Institute located in that city. But it didn't matter. I had a zero self-consciousness. They didn't walk on eggshells. I didn't walk on eggshells. I was Dennis. Not Dennis the Jew, Dennis. And had I been black, it wouldn't have been Dennis the Black. And had I been Latino, it wouldn't have been Dennis the Latino. And had I been Armenian, because there are a lot of Armenians here in Southern California, it wouldn't have been Dennis the Armenian. Whereas almost every place else in the world, even nice countries, it would have been Dennis the. And then you fill in the ethnic or national or religious identity. That's the thing about America. It doesn't matter. Now, did it always not matter? No, obviously, because look, we had so much racism in American history. That is true. It mattered if you were black in much of American history, tragically, but not already by the time I had moved in the 1970s. By that time, race meant nothing to the vast majority of majority Americans, majority meaning white. It meant nothing. Unfortunately, what we have today is a movement backwards by people called progressives or the left, who think you should honor race. That's a racist idea. I don't honor race. Why would I honor race? I honor people. I don't honor race. The idea of honoring race is racist. It's the essence of racism. It's just so remarkable. And this was one of the reasons that I loved America, because it handled all the various ethnic and national identities and religious identities in America so beautifully. You were another Rotarian. You were another member of the Lions Club or the Kiwanis Club or the Book Club or the church or wherever it would be. See, that's what was so remarkable. It is remarkable. One of the greatest lies in history is that America is racist. It's a lie. It's just a lie. This is a great place. By the way, here's an interesting proof of how non-racist America really is. There was an article recently, and I will talk about it on the air, and I may write about it, but we should put it up even at PragerU, but it'll be at DennisPrager.com. And it is just a handful of the incredibly large number of racist hoaxes that have been created in this country, that have been initiated by blacks, who, especially students, black students on campuses, where they're told you're hated, you're hated, you're hated. Every white is a racist. Every white is a racist, and so a swastika on a black kid's dormitory door, or a noose representing hanging blacks from the terrible era when blacks were in fact lynched, and the vast majority of them were not true. They were actually perpetrated by a black trying to show how racist things were. The most famous being Jesse, is it Jesse? Jesse Smollett. Smollett, yeah, Jesse Smollett, yeah. Who created this whole, I was attacked by two racists shouting racist epithets at me, and he made up the whole thing. He was the way, he hired two guys to do it. We got the video of the two guys buying the rope that he ended up showing to the policeman. Oh, you see, look, they put this rope. Yeah, but you bought the rope. So that's a little suspect. That's called a hoax. There were so many of these hoaxes. So here is my point. If the country were really racist, who would need a hoax? Did Jews in Germany in the 1930s ever make up that they were attacked by an anti-Semite? No. There were no hoaxes because there was the real deal. There really was a lot of anti-Semitism. There wasn't one hoax. No Jew made up, oh, look at that, I was attacked by people calling me bad names as a Jew. Unfortunately, Jews didn't need hoaxes. There was the real deal. The very existence of all these hoaxes proves the point about how little racism there is. America is just smeared constantly. People have to make up stuff to tell how bad it is. I just saw an article today in some music website that Western classical music is for whites. Is that ridiculous? Beethoven is for whites? Mozart is for whites? You know the place where classical music proportionately is probably the most listened to? Japan. They're not white. They just love great music. There's no such thing as white music. The idea is preposterous. Shakespeare isn't great for whites. Mozart isn't great for whites. They're great for people. Unless you think that people are intrinsically different because of their skin pigment. It's just it drives me crazy. These are bad stuff. I have a theory. I got to talk about boredom on another one, because I think a lot of people are bored and they need causes. There's a very big factor on the left in America. They need causes because they don't have religion. They don't have a patriotism. They don't have a strong patriotic sense about the country. So nothing gives them meaning. So they have to create meanings. And they do. Like the worst example is this Antifa crowd, which they just beat people up wearing masks. They are, I said on the radio, they're the closest to the Hitler Youth that I have seen in my life in America. It's a very scary crowd. They're empty. This gives them, beating people up in the name of anti-racism gives them meaning. I wonder how many of them are married and have children. I'll bet you the proportion is tiny. Because marriage and children gives people stability and meaning. It was George Gilder who wrote a brilliant book that I read in college. One of the great thinkers. He's done a PragerU course, by the way. At least, I think, 2 courses. And when I was in college, I read his book, Naked Nomads. It's about single men. He made a profound point. He said, you ever notice who commit most violent crimes? Forget color, forget nationality, forget ethnicity. Single men. Made a big impact on me. Men, as a rule, get better when they marry. By the way, so do women. Both equally, but with men it's more dramatic because they're much less likely to commit crimes if they marry, and then if they have children, certainly. So that's why I say I wonder how many of these Antifa go home to a wife and children, or a husband and children. There are women in it too. Anyway, it's a very bad thing when bad is called good. That's terrible, and when good is called bad, that is terrible. There's a biblical verse on that from Isaiah. Woe unto those, or Hosea. I don't remember if it was Isaiah or Hosea. Isaiah's get mixed up. And it is, woe unto those who call good evil and evil good. When you break the moral compass, your society is doomed. Hold on, let's hear Otto for a moment. He got self-conscious. The guy was snoring till I said, let's hear Otto for a moment, and then he shuts up. Okay, that's my man. I'll tell you, I find that so calming. It's a danger I'll start snoring. He does that at night. He sleeps in our room. And it's actually very, very relaxing. Dogs apparently they say dogs add years to your life. Dogs, friends, religion. I'm doing well. Got all that. It's nice. Anyway, to call this country evil, racist, sexist, misogynist, all these terms, when I speak at colleges, which I do a lot, and kids line up, and I always say, if you disagree with me, you're first. You get the chance to ask me a question first. And some young woman will get up and say, how oppressed she is because she's a female. And I go, I don't believe you're oppressed. I'm sorry. You're probably among the luckiest females to ever exist in history to be an American female. And at a college, pampered at a college, and you're oppressed? I guess it's just staggering naivete and ignorance about what the world is like to call America bad. It bothers me because civilization is fragile. You can lose it in a generation. Nobody knows this better than Jews. Germany was the most advanced culture in the world. Musically, artistically, literarily, scientifically. And then in a generation, it became the most barbaric country on earth. Things can flip very quickly because the human being is not necessarily good. Human nature is not good. Not only bad, but not good. So things can happen. And I worry about it. I don't want to mess around with this fundamentally good place that I live in called America. One final word. America was founded on the idea of liberty. Let people be free. Let the government get out of people's lives. No more king and no more government. Of course we have government. We're not for anarchy. But let the government be limited. Limited government. The only country in the world founded on the concept of limited government. That is huge. That is huge. Those of us called conservative have a motto, if you will. Please leave us alone. That's it. That's what I ask. Just please. I love my family. I love my friends. I love my religion. I love my God. I love my work. I have so many loves in my life. Leave me alone. Obviously, I need you to protect my country. We need a military. We need police. We need firemen. I understand all that. And the people who are not helped by private means and by charities, they need the government as a secure place. What is it? The net, safety net. Yeah, a safety net. I agree. We all agree to that. Every conservative does. But it's the last resort, not first resort. Limited government, and again, please to leaving us alone. We've created something beautiful here. That's why so much of the world wants to move here. There's no place of opportunity like America. It's just remarkable. I was with a woman from Sri Lanka. She was my Uber driver recently. And I wish I could put her on the radio. She's so grateful. She said, I came to America, this notion that America is racist. I'm brown, she said. I never experienced a racist minute in my life here from the day I arrived. So what is she? Is she an aberration? It's like my grandfather came from Austria. My grandfather that's where Hitler came from. He saw a lot of anti-Semitism in Austria. So he thought every non-Jew essentially was an anti-Semite. Because he brought European sensibilities to America. So he would drive a car, I would be there, the little kid, his grandson, and he'd be cut off by a driver, and you know what he would say? Anti-Semite! And I remember thinking, at about 8 years of age, Papa, just curious, how do you know he was an anti-Semite? How do you know he even knew you were a Jew? Maybe he cut you off because he's a lousy driver. So people see what they want to see. You want to see racism, you'll see racism, but you've made it up like my grandfather did about the drivers. You made it up. Does it exist at all? Of course it exists at all. Everything bad exists. But it's like saying, if somebody has a bad cold and you say, how are you? So they could say, oh, I'm fine, but I got a cold. Or, oh my God, I am just a sickly person. There's a big difference. Yes, America has a cold, but it's just a cold. We're not morally sick. That's what I appreciate this place immensely, and I hope that the left doesn't tear down this great idea of free people, because people don't yearn to be free; they yearn to be taken care of. That's what I told the European Parliament a couple of weeks ago in Brussels. They asked me to speak on freedom, and that was the key point I made. People yearn to be taken care of. They don't yearn to be free. With freedom comes responsibility. Being taken care of, you don't have to do anything. Happy 4th. All righty, how are we doing on time? Did I take a lot?
23.
Whoa, I did take a lot. All right, here we go. Bryce, 19. And let's see. We welcome your questions. What do people do? Send it to PragerU.com. What do they do to send me questions? Fireside chat. I'm sorry?
PragerU.com at the fireside chat.
PragerU.com at the fireside chat page. Okie dokie. Bryce is 19 years old in Hudsonville, Michigan, USA. Hi, Dennis. Hi. I have noticed that my small Christian university is beginning to push cliché left-wing propaganda. As someone who enjoys politics and debate, I would like to fight back, but I feel I can't be, quote, too controversial because my dad used to attend and work there. So many current staff members are close family friends. How can I make change without hurting relationships? Oh boy, this question applies to so many people. If the left didn't label everybody they differ with as six-herb, sexist, intolerant, xenophobic, homophobic, racist, and bigoted, then it would be a non-issue. You just civilly debate or discuss or dialogue or even argue and then go to lunch together. But they don't do that because for the most part, they dismiss us as evil, which is disgusting. I've devoted my life to goodness. Smearing is not arguing. There should be no issue with you taking issue with what's happening. You do it civilly, and they should respond civilly. But I am more and more of the opinion that you can't let people bully you. And that's what happens a lot. People are just so afraid to express themselves. People come to me in airports in the United States, and they'll whisper that they're conservative. That's ridiculous. Or, a lot of my friends or my colleagues at work don't know it, Dennis, but I'm conservative. Or I'm a Republican even. That's what they do. But you can't get afraid. That's a very important thing. When I spoke in San Francisco about half a year ago, and 6 members of the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra came to have dinner with me. And since I'm into classical music and conduct periodically, I was really honored because it's a great orchestra, and I really wanted to meet these people. And San Francisco is a very left-wing city, but the members of the orchestra know these people are conservative. They get along fine because they're not intimidated. That's all. You can't be intimidated. I know it's easy for me to say to you, but hey, I get attacked a lot. I walk the walk in this case, and I sleep better. And anyway, I have to answer to God and my conscience and my wife. I'm not sure which order. Okay. Sarah, 38, St. George, Utah. My sister is transitioning now into a man. So if she's 38, I guess her sister's in her 30s or 40s. My husband and I have decided that my 3 youngest children are too young to have this discussion with, but I do think that I need to explain it to my 11-and-a-half-year-old son. My question is, how do I explain to him that his Auntie Ella is now Uncle Ezra in an age of appropriate manner? Look, it isn't easy. But I'm a big believer in truth. There are people who are troubled. Troubled is not an insult. Troubled is not an attack. Troubled is not a moral judgment. I mean, please, if you are 35 and you now believe, or you believed the whole time, but you now are finally acknowledging it, whatever the issue is, you are not your sex. I mean, let's be honest. There are only 2 sexes, okay? Whatever nonsense you will hear at the university, there are only 2 sexes. It is binary, okay? Of course it is. It's chromosomally binary. In a tiny fraction of humanity, there are people with both genitalia, okay? We'll leave that aside. And this is a troubled person. It's called gender dysphoria, where you do not identify with your gender. I don't know why that is the case with your sister, obviously. I'm not sure your sister knows. I accept it as true. This is what your sister feels. But here's the irony. Even your sister doesn't deny there are two genders. Your sister simply says, I am a male. I am of the male gender. So the joke about this whole thing is, if there really aren't two genders, what is there to transition to? The very fact that she's transitioning to a man means she's acknowledged there's one other gender. She's not transitioning to nothing. She's not transitioning to a third gender. Of course, there are only two genders. That's what the whole trans movement is based on, that notion. So you could say to your 11 and a half, look, Auntie Ella is troubled in this way. We love Auntie Ella, who will now act to us, and we will be kind and respond to Uncle Ezra. What are you going to say? That's the decent thing to do. But none of this denies that there are two genders. Auntie Ella may in fact be happy as Uncle Ezra and may not be. The doctor at Johns Hopkins University who pioneered transition surgery gave it up. And he's written about it. You could read it. He wrote years ago why he stopped doing it. He said because the suicide rate after transitioning was even greater than before. The issues that most people have. Some people transition and it works, and I respect that. But for a lot of people, the issues are not gender related. They may manifest themselves in gender dysphoria, but there are many other issues that are deeper than that. And if they're not resolved, the transition won't help. And there are people who regret they transitioned. You could read about it. USA Today had an article by a member of its editorial board, actually, who wrote, I transitioned to woman, and I realized after, I don't remember how many years, it was a big mistake. I brought with me all the problems that I had prior to the transitioning. And I lost all those years to develop as what I really am, a man. It's worth reading. We need compassion and we need standards. Both are important. And I feel bad for your kids because it is disorienting. It is true. And people who transition need to understand, the world, you want the world to say, no problem. Now you're a man. That's a little narcissistic. It's not easy for the rest of us who love you, who have known you as a woman your whole life, to go, oh, now you're a man. She doesn't exist anymore. You're asking a lot. I think we should try to accommodate you, but you have to understand you're asking a lot. How we doing?
32.
Okay. Next one was from Norway. We'll try to do it next time. These are important subjects. They need to be seriously addressed. Calling people names is not seriously addressing them. That's one of the things we try to do at PragerU. We don't call anybody names. We try to address this stuff seriously. So on behalf of Otto and everybody in my home, I look forward to being with you next week. Don't forget a couple of things. That we come out with a video every week at PragerU. There's a very touching one now with Niall Ferguson, the professor, major world historian, and it's perfectly appropriate to this subject, on his experience on becoming an American. It's very touching. Hope you'll watch it. Hope you will get my book, The Rational Bible. That's the source of my insights into life. It's meant to change your life. The first 2 volumes came out. It's called The Rational Bible. So until next week, thank you so much for being with me. I'm Dennis Prager, and see you then. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to keep these fireside chats free, please do by donating to PragerU.
I picked a fine time to become an American. It was a grey, overcast morning in Oakland, California. I was one of 1,094 people of every colour and creed from 85 nations, beginning with Afghanistan and ending with Yemen. We had gathered, anxiously clutching the requisite documents, outside the rather antique Paramount Cinema. I wasn't the only new citizen of European origin, but we were a distinct minority. Rather to my surprise, the Chinese were the most numerous group, accounting for close to 1/5 of the new Americans. How many Americans became Chinese citizens that week? Next were the Mexicans, more than 150 of them, then the Filipinos, closely followed by the Indians. Yet it was the sheer range of countries represented that was most marvellous. The young man to my right, immaculately dressed in white, was from Eritrea. He had studied computer science in Wales and had initially come to California to work for NASA. I approach any encounter with US bureaucracy weighed down by dread. So, I wondered, would this be like the Department of Motor Vehicles, famed for its Soviet-style antagonism to the public? Or would it be more like the implacable, pitiless Internal Revenue Service? In fact, the officials of the US Citizenship and Immigration Services could hardly have been more affable. The Master of Ceremonies was a genial, balding, bespectacled chap who won his audience over with a virtuoso display of multilingualism, chatting to us in what sounded like pretty fluent Spanish, Chinese, French, Hindi, and Tagalog. Yet this was very far from a multicultural occasion. Quite the reverse. To get us in the mood for our impending Americanization, a choir sang a patriotic medley, including a rather baroque setting of the preamble to the Constitution, Yankee Doodle, and Woody Guthrie's This Land Is Your Land. Well, that did it. The way that song conjures up vast American landscapes, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters, always gets me by the throat, because, glimpsed in films, such vistas were what first drew me to the United States. Then came the information about our rights and obligations, specifically our right to vote, our option to obtain a passport, and our inextricable link to the social security system. Nothing, rather disappointingly, about the right to bear arms, and not a word about the spiralling federal debt we were all now on the hook for. The ceremony then became more stirring. A Faces of America video had a distinctly martial soundtrack. We raised our right hands to swear the oath of allegiance, absolutely renouncing all allegiance to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty, and swearing to bear arms on behalf of the United States when required by the law. Then we placed our right hands on our hearts to recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the national flag and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's heady stuff, even in Oakland on a Thursday morning. And then there he was, the President of the United States himself, much larger than life on the big screen. This country is now your country, Donald Trump told us rather sternly. Our history is now your history, and our traditions are now your traditions. And that wasn't all. You now share the obligation to teach our values to others, to help newcomers assimilate to our way of life. Compare and contrast with the Barack Obama version. Together, we are a nation united not by any one culture or ethnicity or ideology. The grand finale was God Bless the USA, a country music anthem by Lee Greenwood, made famous following the 9/11 terror attacks on New York and Washington. It too was a call to arms. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free, and I won't forget the men who died who gave that right to me. More than half a century of being British has made it hard for me not to cringe just a little at this kind of thing. But this hokum is now my hokum, and this president is now my president, until such time as we the people vote in another one. Yes, I picked a fine time to become an American, because it's always a fine time. I'm Niall Ferguson, Fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford for Prager University. Thank you for watching this video. To help keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.
And I'm happy to be joined by the one, the only, Ann Coulter, AnnCoulter.com, who has taken up this issue this week. And thank you, Ann, for doing this. I was, first of all, hello, happy Independence Day to you.
Hello, happy Independence Day.
I took a tour with my family 2 summers ago of Monticello, and the person who was giving the tour went on and on about how Thomas Jefferson had raped his slaves. And I'm like in his home, and they're talking about this. And I wanted to beat my head against the wall because I've read enough to know that that's very much in doubt. And thank you for writing this column because you put all the facts in one nice, digestible place.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I hear you have someone else reviewing the President Trump's 4th of July celebration, which, you know, is great. But I would have preferred that he had concentrated on the history of 4th of July and the ringing of the Liberty Bell to read the Declaration of Independence. The authors, the principal one, not the sole one, but the principal one was Thomas Jefferson. He was famous for his flowery and beautiful language.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have upset the left way more than a display of military armaments to remind them about these cisgendered, non-woke white males who founded and created this wonderful country. Also, just the history part of it interests me more. So future presidents concentrate on the history of the day.
But it is pretty remarkable considering Thomas Jefferson is the founder of what we now know as the Democratic Party. I mean, they called themselves Democratic Republicans back then.
Yes, I mean, we're all saying today how left-wing the Democratic Party has become. I mean, Biden is more left than Obama was.
Yeah.
Well, look at how far the Democratic Party has moved from Thomas Jefferson.
Right. Oh, I know. But you're so right. I was imagining that if Barack Obama was watching the debates last week, he turned to Michelle and said, well, no one's going to vote for these crazy leftists.
Yes.
I mean...
Yes. And I'm sorry, we got off on the Thomas Jefferson thing.
That's all right.
I'll get back to that, but I want to make one other point about this. As I've indicated, little testy with Trump for not keeping his central campaign promise on immigration. And the reason I mention that is to say he's standing there naked. He's so vulnerable. He won Michigan by 10,000 votes. If Democrats had half a brain, flash back to the first President Bush, who, didn't promise at every single campaign rally for 18 months, read my lips, no new taxes. No, he said it one time at the convention, betrayed that one promise, and he was just a sitting duck, knocked out by Bill Clinton, one-term president. If Democrats were smart, they'd say, hey, let's look at how Bill Clinton did it.
Yeah.
Because the way he ran as if he was, Mr. Moderate, third way Democrat. And, in some ways he kind of was. I mean, the current party has come a long way from Clinton as well. But particularly compared to Thomas Jefferson, it's mind-boggling. And
yeah.
the most woke left-wing founding fathers would be denounced as Nazis today.
Although, Ann, I've read enough of your books to know that the party hasn't really moved from Bill Clinton. The difference is that Bill Clinton and Barack Obama were better. They were better at lying about what they were really going to do.
Fair point. Touche, Larry O'Connor. And if I could, since you asked, just quickly review the evidence on Thomas Jefferson. It relates to Bill Clinton. This DNA study was made. Well, first, the rumor started with a muckraking journalist who was mad at Jefferson for not appointing him postmaster of Richmond. So first he tries blackmailing. This is back in 1800. First he tries blackmailing President Jefferson. That doesn't work. So he starts this rumor that, in very nasty and racist terms, I might add, calling Sally Hemings a slut as common as pavement, something like that, that sort of thing. So he accuses Jefferson, starts this rumor of him having fathered Sally Hemings' firstborn child, whom he called President Tom. Firstborn was Tom. Sally Hemings' lastborn son was Eston. So 2 weeks before Clinton is supposed to be impeached, or was impeached, by the way, the scheduled impeachment, these pathologists come out with a report. They do a DNA study on the only male living relatives of Sally Hemings and a descendant of, I think, Thomas Jefferson's paternal uncle, something like that, because the Y chromosome stays the same in a male bloodline.
Right.
The blockbuster of the report was that the rumor about President Tom, which feminist historians had latched onto and written a bunch of Freudian analyses trying to prove this, while no Thomas Jefferson scholar ever believed it. President Tom absolutely 100% was not related to President Thomas Jefferson. Eston, the last-born son, was related to some Jefferson male, but as I just indicated, the Y chromosome means it could be any Jefferson male.
Yeah.
It could be related to the paternal uncle. There were 8 Jefferson males living at or near Monticello during the time Sally Hemings' children, particularly Eston, was born. At the time Eston was born, Thomas Jefferson, all other evidence suggests that it was someone else, very possibly Thomas Jefferson's brother Randolph, and there's a lot of evidence here. I won't go through it all. But the most important point is Jefferson never visited the slave quarters. Randolph, by contrast, and there's a lot of evidence on this, was always out there. After dinner, he'd retire to the slave quarters, dance and fiddle with them, stay up half the night, took a particular interest in all of Sally Hemings' children, teaching them all to play the fiddle, and Eston was born when Randolph was not only at Monticello, but he was an unmarried widower. She had no more children after he died.
Yeah. So it sure looks like...
Or after he remarried.
Yeah.
Sorry, let me put that differently. After he remarried, no more children for Sally Hemings. So the evidence and Randolph also had, 5 young sons, aged 17 to 25, something like that, at or near Monticello. The last suspect here is Thomas Jefferson, for many other reasons, some of which I mentioned in the column.
Yeah, and one of them, I think the most important one, is if this is the one offspring of Sally Hemings that appears to be related to the Jefferson family, he would have been fathered while Thomas Jefferson was president. Basically saying, this didn't happen, but now that I've been accused of it, heck, why don't I just go down to Monticello and make it come true? I mean, you'd have to think he was a moron. We know a lot about him. He wasn't a moron.
Exactly. It would be, as I say, like one of the Duke lacrosse players 5 years after the accusation that they gang raped a stripper being proved a hoax. 5 years later, one of the players goes out and rapes the stripper.
Right. That'll show him. All right.
As president.
Can you stick around for one more segment real fast, Dan?
Sure.
Because one of the things that really bothers me about this is that Monticello, the people who run the museum, have basically conceded this point. And I hate it. All right, we'll get to that next with the great Ann Coulter, who always has something great to say, and certainly something that gets people talking. That's why we talk to her and with her.
Live and local. You're listening to The Larry O'Connor Show.
Ann Coulter actually researches the topics she writes about. It sort of sets her apart from most writers these days, columnists or journalists, what have you. Columnists are journalists in my mind if they actually work as hard as Ann Coulter does. And she wrote this week, I like to watch the old movie 1776 and sing along with show tunes on Independence Day. And Coulter likes to write about the lies perpetrated by its author, Thomas Jefferson. You know me and my show tunes, Ann.
Yes, I do. The gayest heterosexual man I've ever met.
I actually want to embroider that on a pillow, but I'm not that gay. But you really finish up your column where I started, which was my tour of Monticello. The fact that the Monticello Foundation or whatever, the association that's now in charge of the Thomas Jefferson legacy and estate, that they've embraced this thing. In fact, they have a whole exhibit down there now. They opened it last year, all about Sally Hemings and the relationship. I'm sorry, it just drives me to...
I know.
You would think it was their job to actually preserve the truth about his legacy, and instead they bought into this.
Yes. Well, it began with a series of feminist authors who are always trying to elevate the role of women in creating the country. And actually, Betsy Ross had a pretty good role, but they don't want to honor her. No, Nike has to pull the sneaker on poor Betsy Ross. So it's always, all of history. I see why young people don't enjoy reading. They just want to Instagram, because most modern books and modern histories, I won't say most, but an awful lot of it is just such PC nonsense. It's all about, can you spot the homophobia? And what are the racial images in Shakespeare? Whenever I hear, speaking of a common or something that's suddenly come back in the news, busing, one of the arguments was that, inner city, which was massively unpopular with everyone, with blacks, with whites. It's unbelievable that that Kamala wants to go back.
I'm excited. I want it to be the centerpiece of her campaign. I mean, please.
Most people don't remember this because I think it was fully ended by the time you and I were coming up. But it was hated by everyone. Kids would sit on buses for hours a day. But anyway, one of the BS arguments was that would have been true if this is all they were worried about. In a sense, it would be true that, the problem is the inner city schools, the ghetto schools, they're just crappy schools. They have, and one of the things that always, they have really old textbooks. So on the busing point, I will say, I know. How about just spend a little money making their schools better? But on the argument that they have textbooks from the 1950s, I sit back and think, oh, those lucky kids! They get to read real history. But this is why so much historical writing these days is annoying. It was this feminist push, 3 authors in a row, and at first the Jefferson historians, and there are many very well-known, very well-respected, every time this would come up, they would explode in anger and say, this is nonsense, it was a scurrilous charge by a muckraking journalist. We've investigated this 6 ways from Sunday. We've looked at all the letters, private correspondence to and from Thomas Jefferson, and everyone else at Monticello. Wills, documents, notes. There's no evidence whatsoever. There's lots of evidence pointing to several other suspects on at least one of the children that we now know is the last born. But the last woman to write about this, a law professor, her argument was that, these historians refuse to believe it because they're racist. And as far as I can tell, basically that's all it took for historians to say, okay, you win, you use the R word. Yeah. And they stopped objecting. I believe, you can Google this, but I believe one of the renowned historians on the Monticello Commission deciding to announce something that is provably, by DNA, false, that Jefferson fathered all 6 of Sally Hemings' children, which is the line they're taking now. No, hey, airheads. Firstborn, definitely not related to any Jefferson male. Only the lastborn related to some Jefferson male. There were 25 living in Virginia at that time, Jefferson males. But one of the renowned historians on the commission announcing something that is provably false was Katie Couric.
Oh, great. Well, Ann Coulter, you and your talk about DNA evidence, come on. I think the board at Monticello Association is actually the OJ jury. They're the ones who are determining these things, and we know how good they are with DNA. Great to talk to you, Ann. Thanks for joining us.
Good to talk to you, Larry.
Great
Happy
article.
4th of July.
We'll talk to you next Friday. You too.
And Coulter, July 3, 2019. Was Thomas Jefferson on the Duke lacrosse team? While tearing down everything that's great about our country, the left has always permitted us to celebrate patriotic holidays. But this year, on the week that we commemorate the unveiling of the Declaration of Independence, Nike yanked a Betsy Ross tribute sneaker off the market because the American flag didn't sit well with Colin Kaepernick. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, DNY, is telling wild, provable lies about America's border agents. This 4th of July, let's look at the tactics used by the left to blacken the reputations of American heroes. To wit, the lie that the principal author of the Declaration, Thomas Jefferson, fathered a child with his slave, Sally Hemings. The charge was first leveled in 1802 by a muckraking, racist, alcoholic journalist, James Callender, who had served prison time for his particular brand of journalism. He had tried to blackmail Jefferson into appointing him postmaster at Richmond. When that failed, Callender retaliated by publicly accusing Jefferson of fathering the firstborn son of Sally Hemings, or, as the charming Callender described her, a slut as common as the pavement. No serious historian ever believed Callender's defamation, not Dumas Malone, Merrill Peterson, Douglas Adair or John Chester Miller. Not one. Their reasoning was that there was absolutely no evidence to support the theory and plenty to contradict it. The Jefferson Hemings myth was revived by feminists trying to elevate the role of women in history. Modern pedagogy requires that no period of our past be taught without turning it into a lecture on racism, sexism or homophobia. Fawn M. Brody got the ball rolling with her 1974 book, Thomas Jefferson, An Intimate History, which used Freudian analysis to prove Jefferson kept Hemings as his concubine and fathered all 6 of her children. Brody's book was followed by Barbara Chase Ribbaud's 1979 novel, Sally Hemings, a work that imagines Hemings' interior life. When CBS announced plans to make a miniseries out of the novel, Jefferson scholars exploded, denouncing the project as a preposterous lie. The miniseries was cancelled. Finally, a female law professor, Annette Gordon Reed, wrote Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, An American Controversy, which accused professional historians of racism for refusing to defer to the oral history of Hemings' descendants. She said, "Racism, so the historians shut up." In 1998, a retired pathologist, Dr. Eugene Foster, performed a DNA test on the Y chromosomes of living male descendants of Sally Hemings, as well as those from Jefferson's paternal uncle. The Y chromosome is passed from male to male, so, if the story were true, Hemings' male descendants ought to have the Y chromosome of the Jefferson male bloodline. What the DNA tests showed was that Hemings' firstborn son, Tom, the Tom whose alleged paternity was the basis for Callender's accusation, was not related to any Jefferson male. Foster's study did establish that Hemings' last-born son, Eston, was the son of some Jefferson male, but could not possibly say whether that was Thomas Jefferson or any of the other 25 adult male Jeffersons living in Virginia at the time, 8 of them at or near Monticello. For Eston to be Jefferson's son, we have to believe that 5 years after being falsely accused of fathering a child with Hemings, Jefferson decided, "What the heck? I may be President of the United States, but I should prove Callender's slander true by fathering a child with my slave. No one will notice." It would be as if 5 years after the Duke lacrosse hoax, one of the falsely accused players went out and actually raped a stripper, in fact, the same stripper. Nonetheless, Nature magazine titled its article on this study, "Jefferson Fathered Slave's Last Child." Hundreds of newspapers rushed to print with the lie, e.g. Study, Jefferson, Slave Had Baby, Associated Press Online, in November 1, 1998. DNA study shows Jefferson fathered his slave's child, Los Angeles Times, in November 1, 1998. 2 months after these false findings had been broadcast from every news outlet where English is spoken, Foster admitted that the DNA had not proved Jefferson fathered any children by Sally Hemings, merely that he could have fathered one child. Only 8 newspapers mentioned the retraction. The science alone puts the odds of Thomas Jefferson fathering Eston at less than 15%, less than 4% if all living Jefferson males are considered, not just the ones at Monticello. All other known facts about Jefferson make it far less probable still. There are no letters, diaries or records supporting the idea that Jefferson was intimate with Hemings, and quite a bit of written documentation to refute it, including Jefferson's views on miscegenation and his failure to free Hemings in his will, despite freeing several other slaves. In private letters, Jefferson denounced Callender's claim, a denial made more credible by his admission to a sexual indiscretion that would have been more shameful at the time: his youthful seduction of a friend's wife. None of the private correspondence from anyone else living at Monticello credited the Hemings rumor, though several pointed to other likely suspects, specifically Jefferson's brother, Randolph. Eston was born in 1808, when Thomas Jefferson was 64 years old and in his second term as president. His brother Randolph was 52, and Randolph's 5 sons were 17 to 24 years old. All of them were frequent visitors at Monticello. While Jefferson was busy entertaining international visitors in the main house, Randolph would generally retire to the slave quarters to dance and fiddle. One slave, Isaac Granger Jefferson, described Randolph in his dictated memoirs thus: "Old Master's brother, Mass Randall, was a mighty simple man, used to come out among black people, play the fiddle and dance half the night." There is not a single account of Thomas Jefferson frequenting slave quarters. Nor did Jefferson take any interest in Hemings' children. Randolph did, teaching all of Hemings' sons to play the fiddle. Randolph was an unmarried widower when Eston was conceived. After Randolph remarried, Hemings had no more children. In response to DNA proof that only one of Hemings' children was related to any Jefferson male, and her firstborn son was definitely not fathered by any Jefferson, the Thomas Jefferson Foundation, the Monticello Association and the National Genealogical Society promptly announced their official positions: Thomas Jefferson fathered all 6 of Hemings' children. Guided tours of Monticello today include the provably false information that Jefferson fathered all of Hemings' children. So now you, at least, know the truth, not that it matters in the slightest. Happy 4th of July. Copyright 2019 and Coulter.